Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living podcast brought to you by Willow Creek Springs. I'm Joe Grumbine, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the system. And, I realized as we're getting into season 2 that I've done a bunch of episodes, but never really fully introduced myself. And so I am doing a series of the roots of the problems and, getting into some of the causes and underlying issues that we deal with. And in doing so, I'm going to be sharing some personal stories that will be able to hopefully get to know me a little bit. But as always, I'm available for consultation. Um, I work on custom formulas of natural remedies. I've resolved a lot of problems for a lot of people, including myself. You name it, we can solve it. So that's where I come from. But I am a formulator. I am a founder and formulator with a company called Willow Creek Springs that happens to sponsor this podcast. So there is a little overlap there, but the idea, the purpose, the reason why we have all the guests that we have on is to share the truth, find the truth, and make a place where we're not sponsored by anybody who has an agenda other than to bring and raise the knowledge of our health and how we all get to it. Hopefully, if one person finds one tidbit that brings them closer to a healthy life, then this has all been worth it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the system. We have this healthcare system all around the world. There's different systems. In the United States, we've got a number of different systems, but we all sort of affected by, this giant monstrous institution that they call healthcare. And if you didn't know, or if you do know, I'll share again. I was born in 1966 in Whittier, California, and my father ultimately became a foot surgeon. And so I've had a lot of experience around doctors in hospitals. Even just as a kid growing up, I sat in the doctor's lounge many times in the early 70s, mid 70s, and watched doctors smoke in their own lounge. I've watched and listened to backroom conversations. And even as a kid, I didn't know much about what I was hearing, but so many things I wrinkled my nose. I'm like, huh, that doesn't seem very, very good. And you may find me to be critical of doctors, but I don't disparage them. I think there's a lot of value into the teaching that we have. We've come to understand human physiology a million times better than we did when, years ago. But we have some inherent problems, and that's part of what I want to talk about. So if you know, or if you don't know, about a little more than a year ago, probably closer to a year and a half ago, I noticed a lump on my neck. And I know this is an audio recording, so you're not gonna be able to see it, but I do have a video of it, and I've been documenting this. But this sucker's turned into kind of a monstrosity, and I'm really aggressively beginning to go after it now. And I was a little lackluster in my beginnings, hoping that it was just going to go away, because we always hope those things. But I'm sharing my journey in the health care system and some of the issues I've had in my past. And hopefully something that I've done or talk about will inspire you to do a thing, or talk about a thing. And hopefully we can keep some people from avoiding problem, or cause them to avoid problems that maybe they would not have thought about, or maybe find a solution that they hadn't have thought about. So in growing up in the 70s, for the most part, I had all kinds of allergies, and my dad being a physician, we had good health care, at least as far as I know. And he had a lot of doctor friends, so if ever there was a need, you knew that you were going to be getting probably the best care available at the time. as we knew it. But remember, there's been all kinds of medical disasters in the name of science, and I don't want anybody to forget it. There was a time when they used to spray kids with DDT to get rid of lice, and there's been so many treatments. Don't get me started about the pandemic and some of the chaos that has happened and some of the cockamamie things people have bought into. But the point is, long ago, you got thalidomide. There's just so many episodes where doctors used to smoke. They used to tell you it was healthy to smoke. All of those. My dad used to smoke a pipe in the house, in the car, wherever we were at. And I have a chronic lung condition. Is any of that because of that? Who knows? Maybe it is. One of the things that we got to remember is we'll almost never can directly pinpoint a cause of something. Once in a while it can, but I suspect most problems have multiple causes, just as most solutions could have multiple causes if we go after it that way. And so, just again, wanted to share the process that I'm going through and hopefully help you navigate. So, as a kid, I had the best care there was. And I was always, given medicine for my asthma and the complications that came, and I hated it. Hated the way it tasted, hated the way it made me. There was a medicine I used to have to take that was called Quibron, and it was so foul I would puke every time I would have to take it. I don't know if I ever figured out, and it actually worked really good. But asthma medications, I don't know what the active ingredient was or whatever. I know they did a lot of adrenaline and that kind of thing, which we come to find out later on isn't maybe the best solution for that kind of a problem, but whatever. But this Quibron was so horrible that I would literally puke every time I would try to take it. And if I could hold it down, I get the jitters. I used to take another one called Alupent, and I don't necessarily remember all the drugs I had to take as a kid. Didn't have a choice really, right? Your mom says take a pill, you take a pill. Drink this, you drink that. And so I never thought about it. But taking shots, allergy shots, sometimes twice a week, multiple shots, multiple testing. And in the end, I don't know if it had a whole lot of effect. Maybe it did. One of the other problems that we have with treatments and things like that is that you don't know what it would have been like if you didn't do it. Anyways, long and short of it, as is sort of typical, my asthma sort of went away as I matured, and as I got into my 20s, it stopped being so allergy triggered and sort of became stress triggered more than anything. So if I found myself into a real stressful situation, I would induce an asthma attack. But short of that, I could walk around in the dust and pollen more than I used to be able to, and it didn't seem to have a problem. Well, at that time, I got into a career of being a painter. And, in my 20s, I was not all that bright, and I was very ambitious and would work really hard and didn't always protect myself. So, while I did sometimes, I've inhaled way too many fumes, way too many particles, and um, also on top of it, from age 13 till but just before age 26, I used to dip Copenhagen snuff, and I did it pretty aggressively. As anybody who knows me knows that I'm very much an enthusiast. If I find something interesting, I generally go overboard. I go in deep. I go too far, and it's just my nature. And as I'm getting older, I'm coming to uh, embrace and understand these things. But you tell that to a 15-year-old kid, and well, it's never going to work out that way. So I've subjected myself to many carcinogens and drugs and toxic environment over the years. So anything that would happen to me would have an explanation somewhere in it for sure. But as I got older and I was still painting, now I'm probably in my mid to late 20s, I developed a cough, and it was a cough that was not productive most of the time. And once in a while, I'd cough out these things. They were kind of like a little worm, and they were really gross and not that big, but they just looked like look like I don't know, like a little gross thing. I don't know. It's hard to describe. Once in a while, I'd be coughing, 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 and then puh, I cough this little nugget up, and then all of a sudden I'd feel really good for a little while, and then slowly but surely the cough would build. Well, now we're fast forwarding to the time where I was married to a woman who had uh, good health care through her job. And so I got on the health care and we began to seek treatment. And prior to that, I was just paying. No, sorry. You'll understand why I'm a little discombobulated as we go deeper into this conversation. I think this is going to end up being a two-parter, but yeah, hopefully you'll find it interesting enough to come back for more. Anyways, this first scenario, I just had this cough, and every once in a while, I'd cough up these cookies that at least I called them. Now, remember, I smoked pot at the time and never smoked cigarettes, but I chewed tobacco. I smoked pot. I was in all this dust and dirt and particles of painting and all of this. So it wasn't really surprising. I just didn't think about the consequences. And we went and I got this insurance, went to a doctor, and I was like, okay, cool. I finally I can take care of this. And I go to this doctor and he looks at me. He's like, well, we're going to need to take some x-rays. Okay, take some x-rays. Oh, you have bilateral pneumonia. Well, that's not good. Okay, well, we're going to put you on some antibiotics. All right, I'm just following doctor's directions, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You go to the doctor for professional medical advice because he is the doctor. Remember me as a layman, I can't say medicine, I can't say medical, I can't say anything. But this guy, he went to medical school, passed the MCAT. He has a license. He's able to write prescriptions and give directives, medical directives. So, all right, I go take the antibiotics, take the drugs, and came back to him in 2 weeks. Took another set of X-rays and determined that it wasn't improved. So he put me on a different drug, and I did it again. Went back, and this time I went back and I knew it wasn't improved. Nothing had changed. I still had the same cough, still coughing up the same cookies. And I just told my wife, I was like, you know what? Let's just go find another doctor. We have insurance. Let's do what we can. And so I found another doctor, pulmonologist in Corona. And we're just randomly, we're asking for referrals. We're randomly looking. My dad and I weren't close at the time, so I didn't really use him. Maybe I should have, but um, just doing our best, trying to figure it out. There's no roadmap, there's no manual. If I was wise, I probably would have written a medical healthcare manual of how to navigate and how to treat yourself best. And so I go to this second guy. He was like a Persian guy, maybe, or Middle Eastern of some sort. And first thing, I want to take some x-rays. Well, I got smart after the second set of x-rays, and I was like, you know what? Let me get the x-rays I just had because these ones are probably the same. So I was able to get those x-rays transferred to this new doctor and avoid because everywhere I went, they were going to want to take an x-ray. Now, this is important. I want you to realize as a patient, you're trying to help yourself. As a patient, I was trying to help myself. As a doctor, you're not. As a doctor, you're getting paid to provide service that you're trained for, and you have all these tools to use. Well, as a doctor, as a scientist, what's going to be better? Somebody else's x-ray that you don't know anything about, or your x-ray that you took and you know where it was taken, when it was taken, who took it, how they took it, and everything, right? So you're always going to want a fresh x-ray. But at what cost to the patient? At one point, is too many x-rays. And are you even concerned about that? Do you even care enough to tell your patient, well, there's a point where x-rays are not the best thing to keep going. There's a line that you could cross when it comes to radiation. They don't tell you that. They don't say anything. They just order the x-ray because it'll help them to decide better. And it's really important to understand that. I'm speaking from my own point of view. Everything I'm telling you is just simply my experience that I want to share with you. But I have had experience in the medical field, I've had experience in the legal field, and this all applies to lawyers as well. People think, oh, I hired a lawyer, he's going to do the best for me. Well, no, he's going to do the best thing that he can do with the resources he has at his fingertips. So if it makes the most sense to go and spend a whole bunch of money on something as opposed to do the work, that's probably what they're going to do, especially when it's your money that's getting spent. So just be mindful. Some of these things I'm talking about might sound a little bit out there, but take some time and think about it. There's common sense that I try to lay into every conversation. And so many times we overlook common sense because of the message that we've been handed and by who handed it to us, instead of us thinking for ourselves, doing a little bit of research, asking some like-minded people, maybe not like-minded people, getting some opinions that are not your own and that are not paid by the people that have given you yours. So this is just all food for thought. Consider your resources, where that information's coming from, who benefits from it, who doesn't. So go to this other doctor, give him the x-rays and whatever the other lab reports that I had. And first thing he says to me was, I want to do a biopsy. And I didn't really know a whole lot about any of this stuff, right? You know, without having serious medical issues in my life, I never had any reason to know, no inspiration, no knowledge of how the medical systems works, but I did know this. I had heard even at that age, this is almost over 20 years ago, that people sometimes have complications from biopsies. So consider this, you've got this tumor or lesion or whatever, something that is a growth that doesn't belong in your body. And because of that, you have complications, you have issues, whatever it is. In my case, I had a lung condition that was causing me to cough and not get good oxygen. Maybe you've got a lump on your neck. Maybe you've got whatever, bladder problem, prostate, it doesn't matter. Where in your body you got a problem. And what happens is, if you got this tumor and all of a sudden they pull a little piece out of it, what happens? You can never do that cleanly. Something always leaks out. And I've just heard enough times from enough people. This isn't case studies or something somebody passed along, but actually people that I've heard from directly, that everything was fine. Then they took that biopsy and then everything went haywire and something metastasized or just complications happened. So luckily or fortunately, my gut reaction was no, thank you. So then we go out and found another doctor and then another doctor. Finally, I don't remember where this guy was referred to me from or where he came to me, but we heard about this doctor, a pulmonologist down in San Diego. Now I live a good hour and a half away from there, and I said, well, let's sign up. I don't care if I got to pay for it myself, if insurance covers it, whatever. Let's go talk to this guy. 'Cause I'm coughing every day, all the time, and it's not getting better, and it's getting worse. And you know, I've got some issue, and I knew I couldn't just let it go. Well, so we go down to this doctor down in San Diego, and turns out he was a real young guy. And what made him different from the other doctors is we sat down and he started asking me questions, like personal questions. Hey, what do you do? Tell me about your daily life. Tell me about your diet. Tell me about how you exercise. Tell me about this problem. When did it come on? What's it like? He was the first one that even asked me anything about what it was that I was coughing up. And I'm like, whoa, this guy cares. And he's actually going to try to help me solve the problem. And there's a different feel from the guy that's working from the textbook or the guy that has too many patients or whatever. I have no idea what makes most doctors fall into this first group. But every once in a while, you'll find a doctor that actually cares about you. Not saying doctors don't care, not saying anything, no broad brushes here. I just know there's a difference. It's just like when you fall in love or lust or whatever. You look at this one person, no connection at all. You look at this other person and you takes a second to break away. Something about that. Well, when it comes to attention, you can't fake that. So when somebody's asking you extra questions and they're sitting with you for more than the ceremonial 5-10 minutes, um, that told me I got found the right guy. Well, long and short of it, he's asking me about this thing I'm coughing up once in a while, and he says, I got an idea. He says, I'm gonna give you a container and I just want you to carry it around with you. And whenever you feel like you're gonna cough one of these things up, just catch it and get down here fast as you can and bring it to me. And I'm like, okay. And it hands me this little, like a film container, whatever, this little collection device. And I was less than a week. Finally, there one's coming. And I was able to catch one, cough it up, and hightailed it down to the place. And lo and behold, he was there. He was waiting, and he took some time and he spent some time looking at it, poking at it, prodding it, smelling it, really getting into it without doing any laboratory tests at all. And then he says, "Okay, well, here's what I think is happening here." He says, "You have I believe we're going to find out." No, no, frankly, no. He says, "I think I know what we got going on here. I want you to go take some tests." So he sent me to an allergist before we did anything. And I went and did a scratch test, which is very common for people in the allergy level. And he's tested me just for a couple of items. And this one thing he hit me on just flared up like crazy. I was like, aha, we figured it out. I don't know what it was, but we have found a culprit. So finally go back down there and he says, okay, well, you are allergic to a fungal spore from a fungus called aspergillus. Turns out it's very common. It's also in a lot of the composting work and things that I do as a natural horticulturalist and farmer. I subject myself to this stuff. And I never generally wore a mask. If I was out there moving mulch around, I just did it and didn't realize that that green smoke that comes up off the mulch sometimes is very toxic to me. I should have thought about it because I do remember now after, running a bobcat or something, being in a lot of this stuff, I would always have an attack afterward, but I never put the two together. Subsequently, he said, well, here's what's happening. We come down there and he says, well, I think we solved it. And what's actually happened is when you take in these irritants, these things that your body is allergic to, your body's first response is to send fluid. That's just your body's natural um, healing answer. So it sends um, inflammation and white blood cells and all of that's the pus and nastiness that turns into infection when your body's trying to kill a pathogen. So your body sends all these soldiers into battle and you're in your lungs and it finds these little spores right down deep into the air passages down there, and all of a sudden it sends these soldiers in there and there's all this liquid and stuff, and that's where the problem happens. Eventually they do their job, they kill the pathogens, and eventually the stuff kind of dries up. And that's what I was coughing up. So it turns out these weird, snaky looking things, these tubular structures that were coming out of me, they were actually a cast, a mold of the inside of my air passages. Really trippy, really freaky, a big wake up call. Ultimately, he puts me on steroids. I was on a drug called prednisone, and he told me straight up, he goes, well, we got a couple approaches we can do. Now, remember, this is 25 years ago. Maybe there's some different solutions today, but he says, I got this steroid that's likely to do you some good, but long-term use has got some problems, a lot of problems. And ultimately, if you get on this drug, I'm going to want you to reduce your dosage as you can. Um, and then we got this other drug. It's an anti fungal drug kind of experimental, but it's going to cost you about $1,500 a month. I was like, well, there's no choice here. The prednisone's about $15 and the other one's about $1,500. So right off the bat, there's a clear delineation between the haves and the have-nots, regardless of what insurance you have, regardless of your connections. If you don't have resources, you don't afford drugs. Even if they're good drugs and could help you, you don't even have access to them because they're too expensive. So that's important right there. It's something to pay attention to. I don't necessarily say that poor people deserve the expensive drugs. I don't know who deserves what. I'm not here to cast a moral judgment on this. I'm just pointing out the differences that happen. Fast forward, I took this steroids at a high dose for a couple of weeks, and then I was driving home from a hiking experience that I used to do pretty regularly, and I'm stuck in traffic, and all of a sudden I start coughing, and next thing you know, I feel like something shifted inside my lungs, and I'm stuck on the 404 or the 5 north, literally just not moving, and all of a sudden I start coughing this nasty, gross, gooey stuff up, spitting it out the window, cough again, same thing over and over again. It's a horror movie. I end up puking out some blood, and it was just this nightmare. I'm like, crap, I'm gonna die in my car right here and now. And next thing you know, I can breathe. I can breathe like I had never remembered breathing before. Cleared me out completely. And I was like, holy shit, this is a miracle. And what an experience. Like, I experienced the value of a drug that has negative side effects. Well, now we fast forward. I found another pulmonologist. The insurance ran out or whatever. We changed career paths, and now we're self-employed again. And I found a pulmonologist that would treat me for cash. I explained everything to him. He seemed like he was a decent guy. He agreed with my logic as far as, yeah, these steroids are harmful. Let's see how low we can get you and still have them be effective, which was at least a positive thing, right? And he didn't give me other drugs to try to combat anything. Well, here's the long and short of it. I took these steroids for close to 10 years. During the course of the 10 years, I gained over 50 pounds. My health deteriorated, and I'm not blaming it all on the steroids, but they were a contributing factor. My immune system was not doing so good. Again, I had all kinds of other things I did that were stupid, but this is the one thing that I know I added to and then removed. Finally, after getting down to a dose of like $5 or 5 milligrams a dose, that was would sort of maintain it. And 10, between 5 and 10, I still had to get these things. And I hated going to the pharmacy. I hated going back to the doctor. I could keep this thing in control. I didn't have to keep going to the doctor where he always wanted to get an x-ray or whatever, another test, another thing. Well, I finally just stopped. No, well, I started going down to Mexico to get them. So you could go down to Mexico, get the same prednisone. It was like cheap. You didn't need a prescription. And back in the old days, you go to the Mexican pharmacy and you probably get the drugs you're thinking you're getting. But since then, that whole scene has deteriorated, and with fentanyl and all the other nightmares, I wouldn't go to a Mexican pharmacy if it was the only place to get a drug anymore. And so I ended up getting off of this stuff and just dealing with the cough again. Now, I learned some tricks, and I wear a mask more often when I'm around the dust, and I avoid the things that aggravated it, but I still figured out to manage it myself. I think I'm going to wrap this up now because the next episode of this, we're going to jump into another healthcare system and then currently where we're at. But I think the lesson that I wanted to convey here right now is the root of things is people blindly go into a doctor, and they don't second guess. I'm not saying you should second guess everything, but at least consider what the doctor's saying. Do your own research. I'm not saying become a PubMed um, aficionado and self-teach yourself medicine, but it's easy enough to look up things and see if a glaring problem is being overlooked. And most importantly, if you have a doctor that's communicative and actually seems to be genuinely interested in your overall health, you'll know it by the amount of attention and time they're willing to spend and the questions that they ask, and even just being forthright if they're going to consider a procedure that's going to have a risk, that they're not going to be too timid about telling you the risk. All right, folks, if you're interested in becoming a guest on this show, remember it's all about you and your experience. When I'm talking, it's going to be about me, but when you're talking, we want to hear your story about health. If you're a professional, if you're going through an issue, if you just discovered a thing, let's support each other. Let's stand up and find a way to be the healthiest we can be. All right. On that note, I thank you for joining us. And this has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast brought to you by Willow Creek Springs. We'll see you next time.